Good. I want to thank everybody for attending today. You're signed up for a webinar here called How to Plan Better and Faster, and specifically we're going to be talking about adaptive insights a little bit later on through the webinar. So the agenda for today's meeting is to tell you a little bit about Corporate Renaissance Group, and we're going to talk about the challenges that current financial executives face. And then we will specifically look at the threats and opportunities and how we can use those opportunities to plan better and faster. And finally, we will take a look at adaptive insights. We'll provide you with a quick overview of what the product actually is, and we'll get into the demo of the product itself. So a little bit about Corporate Renaissance Group. We are a company that was founded in 1989. We're a privately owned company with no venture capital, no debt. It is nice because we don't rely on any external funding. We can do what we want, and what that really means in terms of our company is that we are dedicated to innovation. We invest in training, and we foster the best people in the industry. We build long-term relationships with our client base, and I think this is evident where you can see that we have 4,000 plus clients. We operate globally. You know, we've got our products and customers and services are catered to different size organizations and different industries, and really our overall success and profitability over the years, and we've been profitable every year that we've been in business, really stems from our team of people in the organization. We have a combination of business and technology folks, so we understand, not only do we understand the customer's needs, but we can help you know, find the solutions that meet those needs. We do have the global offices in Canada, the US, India, and Africa. And we have a very strong active partner network as well, with over 600 active partners and associates that we use to you know, spread the word about Corporate Renaissance Group and the services that we offer. So it's worked very well for us over the past 25 plus years. So let's take a moment to actually talk about planning and budgeting better and faster. And what does that really mean to us? Well, if we break it down into the challenges that organizations are facing, it might give you a better perspective. And we don't, you know, we don't make these challenges up. They're well known in the organization. They're verified by various research companies and reports. And, you know, anywhere you look out in the Wikipedia space, you'll find information that supports this. It's not new information, but it is fairly striking when you put it down in black and white. So let's talk about the budgeting and planning process first. Well, you know, it's a very time-consuming process. It takes a lot of effort, and, you know, I think most people will agree that budgeting and planning is a painful process for many organizations, particularly, you know, if they're using a tool like Excel, which is quite manual. So we found that 64% of annual budgets and plans are out of date, you know, by the fiscal year end, and, you know, oftentimes they're not even finalized until well into the new year if you're planning for the calendar year. So, you know, by the time your budget is done, it's out of date. It's a challenge. The efforts spent in creating these budgets and plans are enormous. You talk to any you know, person on the finance or accounting team and talk about budgeting and planning and the upcoming season, and they'll roll their eyes and they're grown. It's a difficult process. A lot of efforts are spent in Excel and in spreadsheets. A lot of time is what we call wasted or non-value added time, because you're adding data from 3 different spreadsheets and consolidating it that way, and you're rekeying data that you got in emails, and you've got all these different sources and you're trying to put them into one version of a budget, and it's a difficult and time-consuming process. It takes a lot of effort. And not only does it take that effort, but, you know, it's also, anytime you have those manual interventions, you're prone to errors, of course, in your spreadsheets, in your links. in formulas. We're all aware of recent companies that have had, small errors in their reporting that have had big impacts in the market. So, we don't want you guys to be one of those. 61% of spreadsheets, contain data formula and errors, and the more spreadsheets you have and the more you have to put them together, the more possibility for error. So it's a big challenge in finance. And the number one challenge that we found that came from a Ventana research paper is that organizations report that their planning process simply takes too long. So, it's a painful process. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the threats and opportunities that happen during budgeting and planning. And so the threats exist. What can we do to try and fix those, or what's our end state, ideal state look like? Well, let's talk about time and resources. A traditional finance role spends an awful lot of time on planning. Number one, as I alluded to earlier, it means your budgets are out of date by the time they're completed. Number two, if you're spending all of this time on, more transactional or accounting type efforts, you're not spending time on more value-added strategic type work. And what we've found is that, particularly at the higher levels in the organizations, CFOs and controllers and finance managers would like to be more strategic and add value to their organizations. And if they're stuck in the details and the transactions and the day-to-day work, they're not going to have the ability to do that. So we really do need to try and free up some of their time to allow them to contribute to the organization in a value-added way, as opposed to just, linking spreadsheets and checking errors. So within an organization, you have many, many, many silos. Some departments, cost centers, sometimes they work together very well, sometimes they don't. Most oftentimes, there's a decentralized budgeting and planning process, and marketing will budget one way and production will budget a different way. And what we need to do is consolidate these efforts. And, there's a real threat if these aren't consolidated, that you have to, take the time to get this data and put the efforts and energy into consolidating this data across an organization so that there's one version of the truth and not 4 spreadsheets being sent back and forth in email trails, etc. So there is certainly an opportunity in the budgeting and planning process, and it will help you plan and budget better and faster if you can actually connect all of your various stakeholders in a single environment. Number one, it streamlines the consolidation process. Number two, you get a big picture at a point in time. There's one version of the truth. It helps you analyze better, it helps you plan better, report better. So it's just overall a better opportunity if we can collaborate and have one central version of the truth and everybody is working with the same big picture and the same data. Traditionally, 90+% of budgets are being done in Excel. There have been many studies that show that people want to move towards automation and other tools other than Excel, and it's really because of the inherent errors and and people errors, and there's Excel formulas, there's broken links, you name it. Everybody who works in Excel knows the risks of using that type of work, particularly as you're, spreading these across the organization, particularly when you're collaborating, particularly when you need to, get multiple versions of various sheets and try and, consolidate them and report on them. If somebody's inserted a row or a column, it's a big problem. Let's talk again about the opportunity. If we can create a central version of the truth, if we can create, standard-based calculations that are locked down so we don't have broken formulas, if we have these automatic links, what it's going to do first and foremost is it's going to have a single version of the truth. It's going to have data integrity because everything is, is based on underlying driver data. It's going to have, buy-in from these end users because they can actually see now and have visibility into the numbers and understand them and know where they're coming from. So, lots of opportunities to move away from Excel and the inherent errors and move into a more consolidated view. And then finally, the last point that I want to talk about, a current challenge or pain or threat of today's budgeting and planning process is that there's just so much data and it's everywhere. You're not just talking about financial data coming from an accounting system or your ERP system. You're talking about volumetrics, underlying FTEs and whatever you're measuring your business on. Data is kept in a variety of sources, and a lot of time is spent on gathering this data and validating it. Well, if we can have one version of the truth, if we can keep this data in one source so that everybody is looking at the same data, and we can have all of these roll-ups and consolidations be done automatically, we can have calculations standardized across the board, it's going to make the budgeting and planning efforts a lot easier. So just as a quick recap before we actually talk about Adaptive Insights itself, we're talking about like 4 challenges or ways that today's budgeting and planning process don't work. Let's just recap quickly. We spend a significant amount of time and resources on budgeting and planning. It means these plans are out of date. Takes a lot of time. We don't have time to do other things. So the opportunity on that point is that we can actually, if we can spend less time on our budgeting and planning process, it will free up time for more value-added efforts. That's a bonus. Everybody wants that. The second point, decentralization. Everybody is out in their own little worlds, oftentimes doing their own thing, and they are not speaking to each other. There's different versions of plans, and people aren't confident in the data, and they're not confident they have the most recent data. They're not confident, that it's all consolidated correctly. So if we can connect all of these stakeholders in a single environment, that will really go a long way towards collaboration. It'll go a long way towards buy-in, and what it actually does as well is encourage conversations. So if you're negotiating, with somebody in terms of borrowing a resource or looking at, cost, you have visibility into, the complete budget, the complete plan. You're all looking at one version of the truth, and our roll-ups are seamless. So it certainly fosters collaboration across the organization and fosters conversations to help manage the business, which is fantastic. Everybody wants that. Our third threat is really talking about risks due to errors and, whether they be Excel errors or links in spreadsheets or formulas. So if we can start to standardize calculations, if we can move towards more of a driver-based budgeting and planning process where you actually have rationalization behind numbers, we can start to automatically roll up data to various levels in the organization without having to manually go into Excel and add 12 cells together. That's going to go, number one, a long way to increasing data integrity, and it's going to go a long way to get buy-in for the budget itself. Very important. And the last point that I wanted to just recap was, there are substantial time and effort spent on gathering a wide variety of data. And it's not just financial data. More and more we're relying on non-financial data. We're looking at KPIs and key performance indicators, and we're trying to measure what we want to manage, and data is coming from multiple sources. So if we can pull that into one version of the truth, everybody's looking at the same numbers, they're readily available and transparent, it really will help to improve the budgeting and planning process and the management of the results and reforecasting going forward. So again, a win-win situation. So, how do we move from the current threats that we see in a typical Excel type environment into the opportunities? Well, there are all sorts of tools out there that can help you with. Today we're going to be talking about Adaptive Insights. So, first and foremost, who is Adaptive Insights? Well, they are basically a company that has been around for quite a few years now, and they have solely set out to be a cloud BI and CPM solution. So they were not a sort of a desktop or on-premise solution that migrated to the cloud because of the, that's where they thought the business was going. They have built this from the ground up for an in-cloud solution, and it's built that way. And what it's really done is it's meant to provide one unified BI and CPM suite. And what I mean by that is, it includes planning, it includes reporting, it includes consolidation, it includes analysis. And the whole point is that if we can actually increase productivity and we can create transparency into costs and revenues and profits and planning, we can help improve decision making. So, that is the overall goal. Adaptive is a market leader right now. Actually, this is an out-of-date slide. They have over 3,000 customers now. They do work through a partner network and rely very heavily on partners, and we've been a partner with Adaptive for coming on 5 years now, and the growth is phenomenal in this. As you can see, we've moved from 2,200 customers to 3,300 customers in the course of a year or two, so phenomenal growth. They're operating in all countries around the world, pretty much in all industries around the world, and they've consistently ranked #1 in market share on many of those customer satisfaction and ease of use surveys. And if you Google them, you'll see them in Gartner reports and all that. Specifically talking about Canada, because we are here based in Canada, there are over 125 customers in Canada itself that are using Adaptive Insights, which is huge, given we do have a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. And the point of this slide is to actually illustrate and show that we are, again, some big names applicable in industries across the board. So, it's not targeted to one industry or one, size company. Anybody can use it and add value to their organization. And how do they do that? Well, they do that because it really makes your budgeting and planning process faster. It makes it easier. And it's an affordable option. So if you look at, time saved and return on investment, phenomenal results there. You can reduce cycle times, move people away to more strategic activities, etc. So what do we actually mean when we're talking about the Adaptive Insights suite of products? Well, it is a suite. It's modular based, so you would pick and choose and use what you would want. You do have the opportunity to integrate to some source ERP systems like Oracle or Dynamics GP, etc. But really the heart of the Adaptive Insights suite is adaptive planning, and this is where you actually do all of your budgeting and your forecasting and your planning solutions, etc. You can create your balance sheet reports, your cash flow reports as outputs, and basically planning can be done at any level that you want. So if travel is big for your company or capital purchases are big, you can create specific sheets dedicated to those, whereas others you may just allow them to plan at an account level. Entirely definable by you, the user, and it should be based on how you plan your business. Once you get your data into Adaptive, it's important that you're going to be able to get it out fast. And Adaptive has some wonderful reporting capabilities. Some of them are built right in, so you can, do all sorts of validation and investigation directly in Adaptive itself. And you can also, leverage or use any existing Excel reports that you might have as an example. So if you've been using a consistent set of reports and you like the look and feel and you don't want to change these, and we can link those to your Adaptive instance and they'll automatically be refreshed. So very, very nice, and they can be distributed and clients love it. So let's actually take a look at the product itself. So I'm going to just minimize this for one moment, and when you go to Adaptive, all you need is a URL, a browser. So let me just open that up. Sorry, here. I'm going to move this over here. So when you log in, all you need is a login, and the login is actually very important because all of the security and everything that you're looking at is based on your login profile, and each individual user will have their own login. So because I'm logging in as an administrator, I'm going to have a wide open canvas and I'm going to see everything. But if somebody has a restricted view of their organization, you would actually be able to see that as well. So, typical look and feel. They've made it look like Excel. So if we pop over to a quick sheet here, let me just go to expenses and I'll show you what we're looking at here, and we've got security set at an organization roll up here. So let's go up to the company as a whole and take a look at the company as a whole. With the click of a button, I've moved from Sales Canada to the company as a whole. Sales Canada was in Canadian dollars. My company as a whole is in US dollars. So now everything I'm looking at is in US dollars in detail. So, one of the things that it does is that because everybody is now working in their own version, if I'm within a certain organization. If I'm in Sales North, when I log in here, I'm only going to see Sales North, and I'll be able to do my budgeting and planning for Sales North. If I'm in Canada, I would log in for Canada, I would see it. But now, you know, all of a sudden I've got 200 cost centers, for example, in my organization structure. Each of them logs in and sees their individual sheets, but me as the overall manager responsible for the total budget, when I log in and I see a consolidated view automatically of all of my companies underneath. So if any of the underlying budget contributors from Sales Canada makes a change to this data, it's automatically refreshed. So I don't have to spend time, you know, consolidating. I don't have to spend time in spreadsheets and trying to link them all up. Everything is in here. And when you do go back down and you take a look at, let's say, some of the underlying data, I actually have formulas set up here. I have standardized formulas across the board. Let's take personnel, for example, and my salary and wages. If I go over to this sheet and I want to take a look and I'm budgeting at the lowest level and I see my payroll expenses, you can see by this little purple triangle that I've got this linked to a personnel and salary sheet, and this data is actually being calculated off the sheet, so it's locked. So I, as a budget contributor, cannot go in and override and create all sorts of hours. This data needs to get populated from an underlying sheet, and if I wanted to see where that sheet was, anytime I click on a cell, I can actually drill down, and I can say, oh, my $22,000 in this particular period came from these folks, and if I drill down again, I can see this was coming from the personnel sheet. I can drill down into that sheet. So you always have the option to explore. You always have the visibility, because this is locked as read-only. If I want to change this number, I actually have to go in and make a justification on one of these line items to change my people. So perhaps somebody's not making the dollars that they wanted, or their salary is changing, their commission target's changing, any of that underlying data. So again, we're sort of maintaining control. We're trying to reduce errors. We're creating standard formulas. There's one version of the truth. So, you know, anytime I make a change, and we'll go in here and I'll say, oh, look, this isn't 3,200. It's 33, or it's not 31, it's 32. Blue just means the change has been made, but it's not saved. If I go in and save this, all of a sudden that change is rendered. Now, anytime anybody looks at this account or this report or does a roll-up, that change has all automatically been you know, incorporated into the total. So there's no consolidation, there's no emails going back and forth. I have the ability to assign notes. So from a collaboration perspective, if there's a reason behind a specific number, this number is because, you know, I can add a note, and all of a sudden that note is in there, and anybody can, you know, see it. You can report on it. So it helps from a collaboration perspective that everybody's looking at one version. Everybody has visibility, and we're really trying to, you know, help and reduce errors and create visibility, create collaboration within the environment. And go through there. From a data, or let's talk about the errors in manual entries. I mean, because I have this data set up and I have formulas, I can see those, I can standardize those, I have visibility to see how this was calculated. There's no questions here for me. If I take a look at, you know, something like my telephone expense, and I see, you know, I can create a head count for a telephone expense and say, you know what, in Canada, my telephone, anytime I hire a new person, I think they're going to get a cell phone, so let's add $50, and we can create those assumptions, and we can have visibility into those assumptions. We can budget below the line. So, you know, here's an example of the head count with the assumptions, and you can see we've got an assumption. So based on my FTEs, if I want to budget below the line for something to justify, you know, I could say, look, we do have training, but I'm not going to expect somebody to put in training dollars at this this level here. We need details. I can let them add the details and put in whatever information they want and put the timing in that they want, and they can justify it. And then that data is in there, and then I can see, you know, and report on that data. So it helps from a data perspective, and that I can create assumptions and accounts to hold my non-financial data, so that when I do want to report on KPIs and metrics, I have the ability to do that and report on those. You know, so just as a quick recap, we let's go back to the PowerPoint for one moment here, and I'll share this again. So just a quick recap. Well, adaptive insights. How can it help you? Well, it can help you by saving efforts. If we can automate at least a little bit of these consolidations, the data entry, the roll-ups, the workflows, the calculations, it's going to save you time. It's going to free up time for more strategic efforts. It can help with collaboration. We have one version of the truth. We have everybody working in the same instance. We can add, notes. We don't have to track down emails or, keep track of different versions. It's all in there, and it's one version. It can help reduce errors. So, many adaptive customers have reported that they spent a lot of time, reconciling spreadsheets. So if we can reduce that reliance and free up some of that time and help reduce errors because everything is streamlined, standardizations or calculations are standardized across the board. They don't have to be in all cases. I mean, you can always allow for exceptions based on your specific plan or model, but it certainly does help. And finally, we're providing with Adaptive a single version of the truth, because every time you hit the save button, that model is updated and everybody is looking at the same data. And what it does is it allows for buy-in, and it allows for people to, have faith in the data, to collaborate, and it's meant to be a self-serve environment so that we can actually go in and take a look at data at a specific instance. So I know we covered that very, very quickly in terms of the challenges that people are facing and the opportunities that a tool like Adaptive offers. I'm going to open up the line for some questions and answers here now. Okay, there's a question on the foreign exchange rate and about different exchange rates. Adaptive does recognize that the balance sheet accounts, for example, use month-end exchange rates, and income statement accounts use average monthly exchange rates. So it does have the functionality for you to be able to specify which exchange rate you would like to use, and you can even create customized ones for your own purposes as well. So very, very flexible that way. Thank you. And my second and last question is, can you restrict access to certain accounts that people aren't allowed to budget for? And the question is yes. I mean, we took a look at Canada and Sales North, and we saw that they had, a whole long list of accounts. But if somebody specifically is not allowed to budget against a certain account, like think of, the HR and benefits type accounts, if only the HR department is budgeting against those, we can certainly restrict access. And again, I had reiterated at the beginning, your security profile is very important, and your logins and what you see is entirely customizable in terms of the accounts and the organization levels in the sheets based on your login, and you can certainly restrict access as you need. Okay, so we are at the end of our webinar. I want to thank you for taking the time out today to join me. My name is Donna Paoletti, and here's my contact information. So, please feel free to reach out either by phone or by email if you would like to get in touch with me for some more information, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Okay, folks, thanks very much. Bye now.